Now let's talk about my right hand. Hey everybody, how's it going? Kevin Freebie here, and today we're going to be talking about my right hand. The first thing that you should know is I don't play this way by choice. I have a neurological disorder called focal dystonia. It makes it very difficult to play in the traditional way. I'm going to do a lot of talking about that later on in the video if you want to stick around. But right now we're just going to really get into exactly what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and break down exactly what I'm doing with my right hand in terms of, I guess, the techniques used. The reason I put that in air quotes is because I don't really think of it as a technique. It's just the way I play. But I'll kind of give a really solid explanation of that, and I'll kind of use some different video examples because I have different camera angles and things like that, and so you can hopefully see exactly what's going on. And then later in the video, what I'll do is I'm going to break down what focal dystonia is, because I think that it's super important. It turns out that there's a lot more people that have it than you think. We all know Scott Devine from Scott's Bass Lessons. He wears the glove. That's a sensory trick. We also know, well, I don't know if you know, but Victor Wooten has recently started speaking out about the fact that he's developed focal dystonia. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and wait till the end of the video. But for now, we're going to get right into it. Okay, so let's get right into it. The basic version of what I'm doing is I'm literally taking traditional alternating technique with your index and middle, and I've now switched the roles to thumb and index. As it turns out, the thumb is a lot stronger than these fingers, and for some reason or another, focal dystonia doesn't seem to bother it as much. Okay, so what I did is I literally started alternating with the fleshy part of my thumb and the tip of my index finger. One thing that I'll say, I'm not telling anybody not to use this technique, but it is very difficult to get these two surfaces to sound even because they're so different. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to some footage of a recent song that my band Side Hustle released. It's a composition of mine called Liam's Tune. And there's actually a close-up on my right hand for part of it and give you a better visual than I can give you right here. Okay? So once again, as I said, alternating between the thumb and the index finger. What I noticed pretty early on is if you're doing it in a particular manner, if you're alternating like this, there's little to no movement, and because of that, it's very similar to a pick. So honestly, I started kind of looking to guitar players since they're the ones that kind of use pick most, and I kind of stole like what I refer to as plectrum theory. It's basically a fancy phrase for saying playing with a pick. Anyway, and I stole some things from there. I definitely adapted them my own way because what I am doing is different. However, there are some basic principles that I started out by and I go by, and now they're kind of second nature, but at one point they definitely weren't. Okay, so we've established this, and I'll say it again. I have no problem repeating myself because I think certain things are important. Alternating. Okay, I am literally just doing this up and down. Well, when I had to develop this technique, I'd already been playing professionally. I had to really work on tone, feel, time, because I didn't want to lose any gigs. Okay? So up, down is great, but there had to be more of a method to the madness. Okay? So I looked at it deeper. What I noticed is the thumb because of the size and because of the amount of skin that's actually making contact with the string, it gives you a much fatter sound. That's why a lot of people will use it even just for basic palm muting, right? Okay, so that sort of thing. And then some people just play like that. If you're playing a simple bass line, it's very consistent. So I kind of started looking into this, and also from some of my studies with looking at right hand pick playing, I kind of came up with my own sort of hybrid way between the two. It was very methodical at first. I feel kind of like everything has to be methodical at first, and then hopefully if you're methodical enough, it becomes second nature. So here's the methodology. I'd already been playing a lot, and what I noticed is if I hit a downbeat with the upstroke of my index finger, because there's less meat on that finger, I was actually getting a weaker sound. So I kind of developed this approach that was on the strong beats, and on the downbeats especially, I would always hit with my thumb. Okay, I'm going to do some lessons on rhythm, so please go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit like on this video, because I'm going to be releasing things like that all the time. Okay, so that would be a deep dive into my rhythmic approach, but the way that they tie together, and the reason that I'm even bringing that up, is because it has a lot to do with the way I play. Okay, check it out. Downbeat, thumb. Okay, typically if I was to alternate with say 8 notes, I'm getting thumb on the downbeat, the upbeat, the ands with my middle finger. Okay, as you can hear, I have it pretty wired in terms of how even they are. I've been doing it for a long time and worked hard on it. However, if you really want it to be consistent, using the thumb more even on the ands is a big deal. When you go into a faster subdivision, and I also want to say that I'm really big on drums and I'm a drum enthusiast. And so I not only looked at pick playing, but I also looked at drumming and the way that they approach it with sticking and things like that, and kind of went from there. Okay, I know it's a bit of a deep dive, but and I might as well let you know exactly what I did, right? Okay, so downbeats, upbeats, but what happens when I played 16th notes? And this is very interesting, at least to me it's very interesting because I'm a nerd. But what happened is when I went to 16th notes, there was a consistency there because my thumb is now hitting the downbeat and the ands. That sounded really good. So basically I was using the tip of my finger for the 16th note upbeats, the E's and U's, 1, E, and duh. But when I went back to normal playing, if I wasn't playing those sort of subdivisions, I would go down, up for an and. So you have 1 E and a, 2 E and a, E and a, 4 E and a. I'm going to go ahead and slow it down a little bit more. 1 E and a. Okay, so we're going to pretend that these are 16th notes. Well, so 1 E and 1 and 2 and. My thumb is hitting both the beat and the end of the beat, the 8th note upbeat, okay? And I noticed that when I play, if I switched between 16th notes and 8th notes, I could hear it. I don't know if everybody else heard it, but I could hear it, and therefore I obsessed over it. So what I did is a step further than just playing the thumb on the downbeat. The thumb became basically on the downbeats and on the ands. And it was a choice because of tone. However, if you watch like a lot of really slick guitar players with their pick, you'll notice that there are some guys out there that are absolutely amazing at playing all downstrokes at like crazy tempos. So it's not an impossible thing. So I decided that, you know what, if it gives me that consistency, I'm going to go ahead and chase that. Okay. So I just started working really on getting those downstrokes. Then the E's and U's are all played with this. And it gives me kind of a nice, if you look at like a bar graph, it gives me a nice like downbeat strongest, and would be the next strongest, because that's the way I feel that natural swing kind of goes. And then you would look at the E's and U's, and even though I could get them dead even, the E's and U's would kind of be in the cracks. So you'd have, and maybe I'll cut to a picture or something. You have like downbeat, E, the and the different heights. And I can get those dynamics because that's the way it kind of naturally feels. Obviously, you want to work on getting it dead even, but I do believe that there's a point past dead even, and that's where feel starts to kick in. And like I said, I'll be doing videos on that, so we'll come back to that later. So to break it down again even further, what I'm doing is I'm almost always going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I don't know if you can really get a good look at that, but it's literally my thumb just going down on the ands and on the downbeats. Okay. All right, so the E's and U's come right here, and I'll just do it. So if we're going 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Okay, so that's kind of the foundation of it, is basically getting that really nice feel and finding a methodology that's really kind of comfortable. Okay, I have added in a lot of different techniques over time. You know, things like raking and sweep picking and things like that. But it has to start somewhere. And the place that it has to start has to do with consistency. Because the thing that was going on in my life personally at the time was I was already playing professionally. I couldn't lose gigs. I needed to make sure that it sounded good right away. And I needed to say, oh, maybe the fancy stuff later. Okay? And so that's what I did. So the basic methodology behind it, once again, is 1 E and a 2 E and a. There are things that you can do like this where your thumb pushes through multiple strings and that becomes like a sweep picking thing. Right? Or you rake. The raking is a bit more difficult than traditional technique because you're kind of already here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump into sort of a list of pros and cons on the things that I think that this technique really helps with, and some deficits that it has as well. So that way you can make an informed decision as to whether or not it's something you want to add to your playing. Okay, there are lots of benefits, but there are some things that traditional playing technique just does way better. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss that. So one of the biggest pros is that it makes interval jumps, large intervals when playing, very easy. Okay, so that was 6 in A Dorian. The reason I picked A Dorian is because that was kind of the groove from the very beginning of the video. Okay, those are 6. I can do 7ths. You'll see that my left hand ends up being a little more limited than my right with those things. My right can keep up with the left and surpass it when it comes to interval leaps. So that's a really solid pro. Another pro would be palm muting. If you look, if I'm not palm muting at all, I'm already in position. Right? I can do... Palm muting becomes nice and easy. It's just there already. This way you can get things like walking bass lines and use the palm muting to kind of mimic that muted sound of an upright. Right? So it's got that thumpy sort of tubby sound, and that comes from the palm muting. It allows you to even play like solo type lines palm muting. I can go ahead and get into that deeper on another video, but for now, I just want to kind of give you the information. On the side of the cons, and this one could be either or, to be honest, it gives you a really distinct sound. I have a distinct sound to my playing now because of kind of the way I'm forced to play. So on one hand, it's not a choice, but on the other hand, it does make you sound very unique. Also, to kind of piggyback on top of that idea, is it just will never ever sound like fingerstyle. There are certain things that when pulling a normal rest stroke, there are certain sounds that you can get that are just a little different than when you're alternating with your thumb and index. I do use just my thumb and sometimes just my index depending on the line and depending on the ideas, but for the most part it's almost always alternating. It's really tough to play evenly because the surfaces are so very different. Okay, once again, the really kind of meaty chunky finger of your thumb versus kind of the tip of your finger, so it takes a lot of work to kind of get those things evenly. So that's kind of one of the cons. One of the big pros to this technique is that your right hand's almost always sitting in a position where it's easy to play chords. Okay, so that way you can add in things like walking bass lines and chords if that's something you're into. So that's a huge one. I mean, because I don't know about you, but as somebody who plays primarily bass, I kind of noodle around with other instruments, but being that I'm primarily a bass player, being able to have freedom with chords is really nice. Okay, you might have to work on your left hand a little bit, but at least your right hand will already kind of be there. The one thing I'll say is I'm going to be making a lot of videos for this channel, and since this is the only way I approach playing in terms of fingerstyle, every single video that I'm going to have is going to be using my right hand technique. So you'll be able to get a chance to study it if you'd like, or avoid it if you'd like, and just really focus on the material that I'm giving you with my left hand. When I had to restart, one of the benefits was that I had to go back to the fundamentals. And so those are something that I really find super important. I know everybody always talks about fundamentals, 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 but it really made a huge difference in my playing. It was a little frustrating because I was starting from square one with my right hand and trying to keep gigs professionally while doing it. Thankfully, due to a lot of practice and a lot of hours put in, I didn't have to lose any gigs. All right, real quick, if you decided to stick around and find out a little more about focal dystonia, I'll kind of give you the nerdy stuff now, okay? I'm going to just go ahead and read the definition because it makes more sense that way. If I paraphrase it, it's a little more open to interpretation. So the definition is, focal dystonia is a neurological condition, a type of dystonia. Dystonias can be anywhere on the body or more of a generalized thing where you find yourself tensing up for no reason. However, when you have focal dystonia, it affects the muscles in a specific part of the body, causing involuntary muscular contractions and abnormal postures. For example, in hand dystonia, the fingers either curl into the palm or extend outward without control. Okay, this comes back to using sensory tricks like gloves or finding other things. Like I carried something around in the palm of my hand, and that was a way of tricking the nerves. I remember playing a recording session and having to hold something in the palm of my hand, and in all honesty, it was really, really holding me back during the recording session. And that's when I was kind of like, I need to do something about this. I need to fix it. I need to have a backup plan. So my backup plan was learning to play a different way, okay? That sensory trick didn't work forever. This is something where I really wish that you don't ever deal with it because it can be extremely frustrating. It takes something that you've worked on for years and years and years and can really make it difficult. In fact, if I'm kind of looking into the past again, I actually remember specifically where I was when it started occurring. I was on a club gig and playing flamenco music. Okay. And flamenco music, obviously, we all know, is very technically demanding. And so it takes a lot of chops and agility to be able to pull it off. Well, I'd been playing a lot and it was late at night. It was probably around 11 p.m., like last set. And all of a sudden, my right hand just started feeling like it didn't want to cooperate. That was the beginning of it. And it would get worse and worse as time went on. Okay. And finally to the point where I really couldn't play. I'll give you an example. If I'm playing traditional rest stroke style, that's all the engine in the car. That's as fast as I can go. That's all I've got. Because what's happening now is these fingers are starting to pull. As you can probably see, I'm going to turn the volume down. little bit, and it just starts locking up. I can feel tension from here to here. Extremely painful, not very pleasant. Thankfully, the thumb is really strong. You're using this muscle right here as opposed to, the ones in your fingers. Okay? So for some reason or another, the thumb isn't really bothered by dystonia. Typically, it's one of these fingers on the hand. With the way I play, if you really look, my index finger is barely moving. Funny enough, it took a long time to develop that sort of technique to where my hand could kind of barely move and I could still get a lot of sound. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, an even sound. But I was able to do it, okay? The good news is, and the happy ending to the whole thing, is the fact that I can play again, and I play all the time. I'm doing about 200 to 250 gigs a year, and it really doesn't bother me all that much. However, I would be lying to say that it doesn't get a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. But I really love playing music, and I'm really happy that I was able to find something to work around the problem areas. One thing that I'd like to mention is that if you think that you have focal dystonia or you're just having trouble with your hands in general, please feel free to reach out. I would love to help you. I would be happy to discuss my situation with you in more detail. I say this because it took about 3 years to get diagnosed, and it wasn't a fun 3 years. It was a lot of kind of trials and tribulations. We looked through everything, carpal tunnel syndrome, thought about surgery, all sorts of things, even like looking into things with the spine and nerves in that sense. So if you really are going through something like this, or you think you might be developing it, I'm here. I'm not trying to kind of like put a dark note on this video at all. That's not the intention. The intention is try to help everybody. Okay. I really hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that I covered a lot of topics that you're interested in. I understand that time is our most valuable commodity, and I really appreciate you spending your time with me. If you like what you saw and what you heard, go ahead and hit like, make a comment, subscribe to the channel. I'll be releasing new material all the time. Thank you so much, and have a great day. I hate that. It sounds so fake. All right, so getting into it, here's what I'm doing. I am literally taking the traditional approach of index, middle, alternate. Oh my God. Don't take lessons from me. This is terrible. So essentially in the way that I do things is I'm always going one and, let me turn on the volume. Okay.